Good evening. Welcome back to Pump Up the Volume. My name is Luis Daniel Muñoz. I'm a medical doctor, also previous independent gubernatorial candidate in the state of Rhode Island. And you might hear an echo today. I think I'm hearing a little one, so I do apologize if you do. We're going to work on those audios. But welcome back to Pump Up the Volume. If you're joining us for the first time, Pump Up the Volume essentially is a medium or channel that we use to amplify voices of community. And what that really means is to ask the questions that ultimately push against what the status quo is. Status quo being the establishment leaders that oftentimes are elected to office to serve communities, but in many respects, with their policies and their actions, work against those communities. I wish it weren't so, but me and my co-host know that it tends to be so here in the state of Rhode Island. You may not see Bill Bartholomew today, who's a fellow co-host. As you all know, Bill is growing in terms of his footprint on the state of Rhode Island, which is a great thing. He has so many projects going on. So he's been unable to join us. We're likely going to have Bill on, like once a month or so, to see how everything's going, and of course, bring his voice and on the ground perspective to the show. Today, we continue to have my other fellow co-host here. So we have Mr. Scott Rotunda from the WBOB 990 independent media outlet, and also someone who is very active at the grassroots level, especially in the city of Pawtucket, with helping to facilitate discussions, right, between candidates, whether it's in a candidate forum or even through his show. Also, we have Mr. Pat Ford, who's the founder of the Coalition Radio Network that we're actually streaming through, and also the co-founder of the Rhode Island Libertarian Party. So just a disclaimer, we are here all coming with different lived experience and professional experiences, some in the finance sector like Scott, some in the health sector like me, and others really, again, in the media sector and at the activist level, as well as some sales, Pat. So I just want to throw that in there. But what that really means for our show is that what we're bringing is, yes, a passion, right, to ask these questions and to really have a solutions-oriented approach around some of the things that can benefit communities. But we're also bringing with us some real knowledge and hopes that in our discourse and sometimes debates, we can actually help build conversations up rather than tear them down. I feel like it's necessary at this time to really remind everyone of that that's joining us. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them at the comment section at the bottom of this stream. We do check those out, and we'll certainly take them into consideration on future shows. With that said, today's going to be a relatively tight show. We're going to try to stick to the 30-minute mark, but there still is a lot to talk about. Maybe not a lot in the ways of like different, complex issues, but in terms of a lot in terms of what's happen at the national and local level and how it's involved some of Rhode Island's players. So to start us off, I'd love to invite Scott to give us a rundown of what's been going on the national front, and maybe you can kind of narrow it all down to our outgoing or now outbound governor who got on a plane to Washington, D.C. earlier today.
Yeah, Dr. Muñoz, it's really easy to blend the national and the local today. As we all know, and if you have been away from media all day today, let us be the first to tell you that Governor Raimondo, her meteoric rise, her breathtaking rise through Rhode Island politics, finally led her where we all in our deepest heart knew it was going to go, away from Rhode Island. She was today, by an overwhelming margin, confirmed as our next Secretary of Commerce, at which point she promptly did what we thought that she should have done long ago and resigned, paving the way for Lieutenant Governor McKee to now take the to take the big person chair, and he has been sworn in as our 76th governor. Got a lot of different feelings about that. I do wish Gina Raimondo the best as she heads to Commerce, and I hope that she does us proud. On the other hand, I'm also thankful that she's finally a former governor. This is something, let's face it, we knew this was going to happen for a while, ever since she was picked for Commerce. And we've been in this strange holding pattern where, she wasn't talking to the local media. Her camp and the McKee camp weren't really talking to each other. And she was kind of, I don't know if she was holding this gubernatorial seat in Rhode Island on the off chance that she didn't get confirmed to have something to quote unquote fall back on. But that's what it felt like to me, because it sure seemed that she was checked out. And the thing is, what I'm going to say is all Rhode Islanders, whether they vote or not, whatever their backgrounds are, whatever their political inclinations, whatever, we deserved better than to be essentially the safety valve in case the governor didn't get to climb to that next level.
I appreciate that, Scott. I mean, it's been a decade with Governor Raimondo in one capacity or the other, from treasurer to governor. We've certainly seen, I would say, I think everyone had hoped after Lincoln Chafee that there would be a breaking up of the boys club, as they say. And optics wise, it did seem that way, right? I mean, I can't say it didn't seem that way. Certainly the discussion was elevated around technology, around innovation. I think that there is credit that needs to be given to even introducing those big ideas into Rhode Island politics, right? Where most of our legislature is not necessarily tech savvy, and we saw that during the pandemic when they were unable to even operate remotely. So there's credit there, but I think the concern, is that over 10 years, we've seen a new type of political establishment rise up that is very much kind of big politics, as they say, kind of Wall Street politics, more so than ever before. And, the McKee administration is coming in with this, I think, hope that some people have that it'll get back to the grassroots level. But interestingly enough, I mean, being the 76th governor, I don't know if that's also his age, but, I guess, what are we going to do? Return to what we used to do? What does grassroots mean from a McKee perspective? Is it operate the same way we did when Kachiri was governor? Because if so, that level of regression doesn't really get communities ahead. It really doesn't position Rhode Island to get out of this downturn, if you want to call an economic recession a downturn. It doesn't really help us get out of it quickly. So one of the questions I have, and I'd love to get your perspective, Scott, and Pat as well, is this 76th governor really the person that is going to bring this state back from where we find ourselves now in 2021?
Who do you want to lead off? You want me to lead off, or should Pat lead off?
How is that? Can you hear me okay, fellas? Yeah, so I would say a resounding no. And here's the problem. I think, first of all, he's already got an eye towards reelection, which is disappointing. What we really probably needed at this point was an administration that was not so much a caretaker, but an administration that was going to be geared towards problem resolution absent politics. But if you look at everything that's happened so far, it's been this sort of, tiptoe through the political tulips, not wanting to offend anyone, not wanting to cast off a failed administration, not wanting to offend anyone, not wanting to make any hard decisions. So I have yet to see anything other than business as usual. And it's disappointing, to tell you the truth, because right now, what's that bad disco song from the 80s, Scott? I Need a Hero? That seems to be playing loud soundtrack of what's called Rhode Island today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I have to echo a lot of what Pat said. I think, Governor McKee, I don't think he's a bad man. I think he's well-meaning. The problem that I have is to solve the problems that we're having in Rhode Island right now in this new paradigm post-pandemic with the ever-changing economy in the 21st century. I think we need someone who who understands certainly the science of a pandemic, if you will, and also has some sort of a background outside of government, in business or in the medical field or what have you. We need someone who's younger, who's not. I mean, let's face it. Governor McKee is essentially a lifelong politician. He was mayor of Cumberland for a time, then he was lieutenant governor, and now he's governor, and that's great. None of those are bad things, but it does mean that his experience is from being inside of the government. And I think we need someone from outside the government, with that real world experience that can help to lead us forward, that understands, like, look, Governor McKee has never had to worry about, oh my God, how am I going to make my rent or my mortgage payment this month? Or how am I going to pay my car payment? Or how am I going to pay, my kids' tuition at university? We need someone in there who's experienced those kind of things, is how I feel. And Governor McKee is for as well-meaning as I'm sure he is, and I'm sure he's going to try to do the right thing. I just don't think he's the guy for that.
I appreciate your sharing that, Scott. I mean, it's interesting. Like I look at some of the, I mean, there were some red flags, as they say, that were raised today when he released his staffing list. Not because of the individuals. I didn't go that far into like, making that level of assessment or quality assessment, but just the titles. There were so many titles that were around communications. And what I wonder is, why are those titles set up? If they are ambassadors to communities and they're bringing community voices into the administration, allowing the community to inform decisions, that's one thing. But we've just seen an administration that's, again, outbound, that's out, that was using many more PR and communication staff to really, create barriers to truth, right? We can call it, really to veil the public with respects to a lot of things that were going on, including Point Judith, which Seth Magaziner is still continuing to withhold information. And so I do have concerns, like what are these pillars of the communities that have been set up in the administration, or are they in fact walls, right, that are being set up between this administration and the communities? There are also some interesting appointments that have been made, and I just want to lift those up. We've seen young people from communities of color, people that represent Black Lives Matter PAC, Political Action Committee in the state of Rhode Island, that have been placed in equity roles within the administration. I find that very interesting, right? I think that is certainly something that I see as a positive. I don't know if the McKee administration is assuming that by giving positions that's somehow going to serve to his benefit for reelection. My hope is that that's not why he's doing it. What we need is a real culture shift, and people don't appreciate transactional relationships, especially when you're talking about making change. So there's things that are happening now, and my hope is that the intention behind them is different from what some examples of intention have been for the previous administration. And that is for both Dan McKee himself, to avoid anything backfiring on him, but also just generally for the sake of Rhode Island. We need to stop playing the same types of politics. No one benefits except the few that are making the deals around the table. So if this is going to be now, interim, as they say, or sitting Governor McKee's legacy, I hope that he plays two scenarios out. Possibly the scenario that he has another shot in 2022 to 2026. He can play that out if he'd like in his mind, but also play another scenario, which is, what if you only had 2 years? What can you do in 2 years? And can it really leave a lasting positive impact on the state of Rhode Island? And my hope is that he thinks about that carefully, and that the decisions he's making today are based on that. For our sake, right? Our sake more than his re-election bid sake. So Scott, Pat dropped off. I'm guessing he had technical issues. He was in the field. So what do you think? Do you think that we have a stimulus package coming? We have money coming through the door. We have what we hope is a positive trend in this crisis, where we're seeing lower infection rates, where people are now getting vaccinated in greater number. We're not there yet, but it's a positive trend. If the McKee administration does not allocate those funds in ways that create sustainable infrastructure, then really this does nothing for the state of Rhode Island. So let's think 12 months ahead, Scott. Thought experiment. 12 months from now, how does he use that 1 point some odd billion dollars to ensure that Rhode Island's well positioned for the next 4 years?
Well, I think first and foremost, as we're definitely not out of the woods with this pandemic, he needs to add, he needs to allocate it towards making sure that vaccines are available, certainly a hell of a lot more than they are right now. And that I know he mentioned he wants to prioritize teachers and, just kind of keep working it down through the aged population and the teachers and the first responders, until all the adults have their chance for the 2 doses. After that, I think he needs to look into bolstering the state's unemployment fund, because Rhode Island is generally the last out of any recession and the first into it, and we can't always count on the federal government bailing us out, kind of like we did in 2020 with COVID, where they kind of gave the extra boost. So we should be able to do some of that ourselves. And with the rest of it, it really should go towards infrastructure. I know there's been some progress on that, but our roads are still in pretty terrible shape. These are 3 things that I think that he should focus on. And if he can make progress on those 3 things, then he's had a relatively good couple of years. And if he hasn't, if, like you said, it's just the good old boys network and business as usual with people around the table cutting deals, then he's got a 24-month period of essentially a Seinfeld episode of a show about nothing.
Has Dan McKee ever shown signs of actually taking bold steps to invest in people more? You know what I mean? I feel like what I'm still trying to understand, because stories are retold, reframed, and by the time you hear them, it all sounds great, right? Depending on who's telling the story. Right. And sure. And I get the he has municipal experience, but things weren't perfect in Cumberland. And I wouldn't say that corporate charter schools are reflective of investing in people, right? I mean, there's some benefit clearly to students that are able to access those opportunities. But what bold steps or examples do we have of Governor McKee really pouring into, micro businesses and, people in terms of their, economic pipelines to opportunity and ensuring that everyone can live the American dream? I mean, what do we have examples of that? And Pat, I think you're still on. I think I hear you in the background. So please, Scott and Pat, both feel free to share, because I don't have information to attest to that.
No, I don't either. And in this case, I would defer to Pat, as I know, he's lived in Cumberland, where, McKee was the mayor for a period of time. So if there has been those type of actions, I've got to believe it would have happened in Cumberland. So if Pat's with us, then by all means, man, jump in and fill us in.
Yeah, if I'm the disembodied voice, the incredibly disappearing man here, my first of all, if you look at a great deal of the political influence in the cabinet, it's really Cumberland. And I think it was the Providence Journal that pointed out this weekend that all of a sudden Cumberland is the center of the Rhode Island political universe, which is fascinating because for so many years the state's been Providence and Warwick centric, with a splash of the bucket thrown in. So that's certainly a wrinkle, and it remains to be seen what. And I guess Mr. Policina is going to be chief of staff. Is that what it appears to be? It'll be interesting to see what that impact has on Rhode Island politics, and particularly the city of Johnston. But there's going to be a time very shortly when this governor going to have to confront issues that are non-medicinal, if you will, non-COVID, non-corona, and I don't know if this crew is ready for that. You can only keep folks down for so long, but all of the issues, look at the cross-section issues that were raised in today's bond issue. All of those issues have been on hold now for over a year, and people are tired of waiting for resolution. One of the things that's going to blow up in his face soon is going to be the Second Amendment coalition, because the progressive wing of the House is hell-bent on this incredible Second Amendment agenda. And if folks think that the other side is going to sit back and get all these new edicts handed to them, they're crazy. That's a tough group politically. They're focused, they're disciplined, and right now the signals coming from the lieutenant governor aren't good.
Interesting. So what does Dan look at? Like I find it interesting that Dan McKee is coming out of an area of Rhode Island where we know that the mayors stick together for better or for worse. And it'll be interesting to see if he picks Diosa as lieutenant governor, which were the rumors and a lot of the smokescreen application process. Smokescreen because Policina and James Diosa are like mentor mentee as well. So everything seems to line up towards like the idea that Diosa will be lieutenant governor. So if this happens and you have this kind of coalition of municipal leaders that are coming together to support one another, I can see not so much of a political courage, but just a reinforcement of some of the actions that we've seen taken, even with now the soccer stadium in Pawtucket. How does a McKee administration that's bringing these players together that have not necessarily challenged cronyism in the past really affect everyday Rhode Islanders that are having a hard time to even live in this state? Even like what does affordable housing, if we do get that bond passed, really look like under the governance of a McKee administration? Because we all know it's not just about the money; it's how you allocate it and how you structure the programs and ultimately how you dispense and implement, right? So the program. Scott, what are your thoughts? Like, is this, there's a few questions in there, but please take it wherever your mind goes.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know what to say. With the same cast of characters, it just kind of goes to what I said before. It's just kind of a continuation of the same old, same old. Like for affordable housing, as just recently said, who in Governor McKee's cadre or cabinet or circle of advisors, whatever we want to call it, who's had experience in affordable housing? That's what I would like to know. Have any of them lived in affordable housing? Have any of them needed to live in affordable housing? Do any of them know the trials and tribulations of people who live in affordable housing? I would doubt it. So, if we're going to use like that metric and kind of superimpose that on other ones, I can't say like they may be well-meaning and say, yeah, we have to do something about affordable housing and we have to allocate funds to it. But as far as I don't even think they know how to distribute the funds, what they should go towards, what sort of safeguards should be in place, what sort of standards they should have in place.
Pat?
I don't know that I can really answer it because again, there's this vagueness on actually what skill sets are there to actually implement anything. Gina went cast her net far and wide for her sort of dream team. There just seems to be such a void. In terms of these issues. And okay, let's talk about affordable housing. This lieutenant governor is known really only for two things: his quote unquote expertise in small business and his expertise in education. Is he even going to have the time to wind up any real efforts whatsoever, or is he going to be a placeholder? I just I keep getting back to the same thing tonight. I know that's probably a little frustrating for folks, but I don't know that there's any there. Gina was all about policy wonks from literally from around the country. This is not going to be a policy wonk administration. This is going to be a bunch of local guys who are basically townies. And I say that with respect. I mean, maybe we need a little townie. Maybe we need a little back to basics and hands-on administration. But I just simply don't see any sort of, I don't know, school of thought, intellectual process. I don't, most administrations are marked by their sort of signature accomplishment and their signature attention to a particular issue. This guy, I think, is just, once he gets the needles in the arms, I think it's just going to be a placeholder. Disappointing analysis. I get it. But it's what we're trying to mine for gold, and
So,
and it's there.
That's a good
so look,
analogy, Pat. Actually, it's a really good one.
yeah, and I just we have the talent in Rhode Island. Not just talent, we have the wisdom though too. I just want to, we know that even in the administration, the Deputy Secretary of State Melissa Husband has experience with housing in her prior work. We know that Angie Ancoma from the Rhode Island Foundation has experience in public health, right? We know that there are people with both lived and professional experience to address the challenges, systemic inequities that we see in front of us. And yet, time and time again, not to diminish the people that have been appointed to these roles, especially from communities of color, who again, congratulations to them. But I also think that when you look at those that have been deputized as compared to those that are directors, you see the play, right? You see the smokescreen. They're bringing people in, put you here, can you mobilize communities to support me if I put you in this position? But and then ultimately the directors are the same players. We're not taking, as Scott said, people with lived experience and putting them into those executive roles that are accountable and have the autonomy that they need to actually affect change. We're placing them into deputy roles where they can still do good, but ultimately there's still some control measure in there. And that's what's unfortunate, right? And ultimately, like this administration, like I hope I'm wrong, because if if I'm right, then I think it falls into what you said, Pat, which is we're going to continue to do the same thing and no real bold steps will take it, and then you fall into that dynamic of not much happening. But for the most part, though, there's a yeah, Pat, you were saying.
I was just here's one of the other issues. There are not going to be a lot of talented folks who want to hitch themselves to what is seen as a standby, a short-term lame duck administration. You're not going to see a lot of political adventurism in the terms of people willing to take great ideas and put them to the test with a group of folks who are largely confined to being mediocre mayors. That's we're in a point in time where we need that sort of spirit of, for lack of a better cliche, can do. Let's take a shot. Here are some big ideas. Let's see if we can conform them to the crisis at hand. And I don't know, Doctor. I just, getting back to the same thing. I don't know if this is the folks that we can look to for that. There's nothing in any of these people's experience to indicate that there's any level of greatness or even sense of adventurism in any of them. Yeah.
I hear what you're saying, Pat. I maybe I'm too much of an optimist here, but I think that there are people that would willingly step up if they were given the autonomy, right? Given the autonomy to actually do something. But certainly, I don't think people want to be used as tokens, and we've seen that in a lot of administrations in the state of Rhode Island. So, with that said, we're at about 30 minutes. I want to make sure that both you, Pat, as well Scott, have time to give a solid 60 seconds of what you've been up to, what you will be up to in the coming weeks or week. Direct people to the channels that you want them to pay attention to. So why don't we go in this order, Scott? Why don't you go first, and then we'll have Pat go after.
Sure. You guys can always catch me Monday nights from 8 to 9 p.m. on 990wvov.com. The name of the show is The Rotunda. I do a lot of current events. I do mix it up sometimes with some entertainment. I've got a couple of entertainment guests hopefully lined up down the pike here. I'm also to be determined. I will have an hour-long show on the effects of addiction. I'm gonna have two people on, actually, a husband and wife team that have gone through the struggles of addiction to drugs themselves and have been clean and sober for a few years, just to to give kind of their experiences, and just trying to keep it as a as a sounding board for the community.
Thanks so much, Scott.
If you're listening right now, you know where to find us. Facebook.com/Coalition Radio. We've got a few things coming up this week. First of all, stay tuned after this. Mike Fury is running a new restaurant show, Chopping It Up. Tomorrow we've got Tina and the folks at Ramp are going to be again performing some groundbreaking efforts in talking about really challenging issues about access for folks who are physically challenged, and how to prosper despite all those challenges. Thursdays we've got the Golf Dudes. We're going to be diving as an effort into two areas. Number one, we're going to become a little bit process absorbed, if you will, with government. We put forth a challenge down to Peter Alvidi at the department, if you're the Rhode Island Department of Transportation today, about, if you will, public access laws, him hijacking Capitol TV. We're going to be pursuing that. We're also going to be diving deep into foreign policy issues, particularly with regard to the conflicts in the Middle East and getting more deeply involved with people in the peace movement.
Thanks so much, Pat. And just for today, I wanted to really take time to. I've been trying to do this more often, so I don't think it's enough to just end with what we're going to be doing. I think it's important to just have a moment of reflection and consider where we are. So a year ago, the world was completely transformed by COVID-19. Since that time, what surfaced was not some kind of new crisis, but really the crisis beneath the crisis, right? The inequities, the disparities, the injustices that were already taking place really worsened the transmissibility or the transmission itself of COVID-19. And frankly, I think over time, as we look back on 2020, we're going to find that there were just so many preventable deaths that we could have addressed had we just invested in people, had we just cared about people, had we just taken time to just spread a little more compassion into the world around us. I don't think that every person listening to this necessarily needs to look in the mirror and say, what part did I play? But ultimately, I think as a society and as a people, we have to understand that liberation, liberty, that all those catchy words, justice that we use, there's a individual perspective on those words, but there is a social construct around those words as well. There's an element of each of those words, each of those ideals that requires an agreement between people. And despite the debate that anyone might have as to how many people are necessary in that agreement, I mean, ultimately, when one person suffers, in one way or the other, we all suffer. And I think that idea has become a real tangible feeling for a lot of people, right? Like we understand what that actually means after 2020. So in moving forward, my hope is that everyone who's listening today will have the courage to look in the mirror. And even if it's not a sense of responsibility that you had before 2020, my hope is that we can all take in what our responsibility is in moving forward into 2021 and what we could do to help our communities, along with our families, get out of this crisis. All right, so thank you all. Hope you have a great evening, and I'll see you all next Tuesday.